Welcome to Authored by Us, a podcast celebrating children's books about characters of color or of different cultural experiences, and the authors who bring these diverse works to life. Each week, we invite you to join us as we turn the pages of these bookshelf gems and hear from their creators who understand that stories of diverse experience truly come to life when authored by us. Here's your host, Zenzi Hodge.
Greetings and welcome, listeners. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Authored by Us. On today's episode, we are joined by Delshawn Taylor, and he is the author of the children's story, Do You Know What Makes a Man? Welcome to the show, Delshawn.
Hello, and thanks for having me.
We're glad that you can be here. Now, first, I have to be honest with you. I'm a boy mom. And every time I see social media posts about girl dads and, moms taking pictures with their mini me's, I'm always wondering, well, what about the boys? So to see a book about our sons, or as we like to call them, our sunshines, I'm just thrilled. So tell us about your book, Do You Know What Makes a Man?
So, in my book, Do You Know What Makes a Man? A young boy goes on a discovery to learn what attributes make a man. And he learns by talking to his mom, his brother, a friend, and his dad, his teacher. So he gets the ingredients of the manhood recipe from many people in his life.
I like that you call it a manhood recipe because I think at the very beginning he starts clearly with an image of what a man looks like, and
Yeah.
he has a super strong looking guy and someone that may not have the same muscular frame, but it seems that he has a visual in his head about what a man looks like. However, based on the questions that he asks these different people, they're sharing with him that a man can be anyone, even him.
hmm It's a question that I think we think we know the answer to, and then even as I was writing the book, I realized, wow, these are things that I've learned from other people, and it was kind of a way for me to, I guess, check myself in a way to make sure that I'm living up to these attributes that have been shared with me, and hope that I can emulate for other young boys who may see me as I walk through life.
You picked very specific qualities such as kindness, fairness, being a friend, and having the courage to explore. Why these qualities? And why do you feel it was important for readers to focus on those specifically?
Well, I think what you said earlier was the young boy in the book begins with this image of manhood being something that has to that something that is connected to strength or size. And I think sometimes when we think about being strong, we think about sometimes being. I think sometimes we think that strength is an antonym for kindness or compassion. And I wanted to encourage young boys that to be kind in the face of any type of oppression is strength. And so being kind, taking the high road has more to do with who you are as a person, and shows greater strength. So I think being kindness and being fair, I think those are attributes that not only help you grow as a person, but also will help you grow through life, because people that you interact with will remember your kindness and your fairness. And I think that that will help you be successful not only in your relationships but also in your career and just being a friend to people. There's a quote that I'm paraphrasing that says that always be kind to people because you never know what battles that they may be fighting inside or inwardly. And so being a friend to anyone that you can is so important, because you have no idea what those people may be going through, and you don't know how they might be able to touch your life. And then lastly, I think the last one you mentioned is exploring. Life is an adventure. It's an exploration to discover what you want to do, discover who you are. And so I think those traits of kindness and fairness and friendship definitely make life, that journey of exploration, worthwhile.
So, we've talked about the fact that I wrote a book as well, and there's something I found in your book that reminds me so much of mine. Your character does not have a name. Was that intentional? And why wasn't he named during your story?
Well, I thought about doing that, but I also thought that that might present a barrier in allowing the reader to see himself as the boy. Because, for example, if the reader is reading it with their mom or their friend or a teacher, you have that kind of that relationship being built throughout the book of asking a question and that question being answered. So not that I think that books that have characters with their name are not impactful, but I think for me it was important to make sure that the reader could see themselves as the boy in the book.
I agree with you. It's important for your audience to see themselves
Yeah,
because as we read, we're putting ourselves in the place of the character in the book.
correct.
And so this leads to so many opportunities.
Yes, most definitely.
Now, while the main character in your book is a young boy, this book is open to children regardless of gender. And I think back a lot to how my sister and I interacted with our dad. He really believed in being intentional in showing us the positive images and the positive behaviors of a man. So, in writing this book, did you find this to be an important question for young girls to be able to ask and have answered for themselves?
When I that's a great question. When I was writing the book, having an education background, it was clear to me and the African communities in which I had worked in that there were not a lot of positive role models that these young, smart, gifted young black boys were seeing. And so it was important to me that they had a roadmap, in a sense, a resource. But as I was writing it and also getting feedback eventually from friends and family, and coming back to some of the attributes, I realized, oh wow, these are attributes that are not particular to manhood, but just to being a good human being. And so I've encouraged a lot of people to read the book to not only their young boys but their daughters as well. And I think no matter your age, the lessons in this book are lessons that stay with you and continue to help you grow to be a better human being.
So, Delshawn, the illustrations in your book are amazing and they truly draw you in. I find them both to be inviting and yet provoking. So, for example, each time he asks the question, "Do you know what makes a man?" He not only has curiosity in his eyes, but he's always also looking earnestly at the person he's talking to. And he's really looking up to them for an answer.
Yeah, he is, and I think for me, it was about making that connection, and you can see the love and respect that he has for the people that he's asking, and also the love and respect that they also have for him. The jewels or the pearls of wisdom that he is getting from them, and they're sharing with him, are going to make him into a great man, a great human being. So
Something else I also noticed was that when he was given a response, each person, whether they were standing or sitting, they remained at a level higher than he was. Except when, and I don't want to give any spoilers away, but except at the end when he asked the question of his dad. His dad knelt and came down to his level in order to respond. Was that by design?
So that was something that I wanted to happen because, the title of the book is Do You Know What Makes a Man? And so to see the epitome of manlyhood or manliness, the boy's father coming down to his level and relating to him. And to add to this, each person that he meets, they affirm what he's already told them that of which he's learned or what he thinks he knows. So again, it's that affirming the inquisitive nature of the young boy, affirming his the knowledge that he has gained, which I think is so important that we affirm the exploration of our youth and the questions that they have. So again, so I guess to get back to the question you asked, that was a intention of mine to have the father come down to his son and really have a meaningful moment with him.
And you touched on the fact that with each person, he asks his question to, he builds on what he received before
Hmm.
and incorporates it into the question for the next person.
Hmm.
And I thought it was really important to see that one, he retained what he learned previously,
Previously.
and
Yeah.
he presented that to the next person and said, "Hey, this is what I learned." Is that the case?
That was because I'm a firm believer that no matter your age, you still have wisdom that you can share with someone else. Like when I taught in public schools, I learned just as much from the students as they probably learned from me, if not more. And so I think as adults, even though this young boy is going through this book and gaining knowledge, as as you said, he is retaining what he's learning and resharing that with other people who may not know this. So at the same time, there's this exchange of knowledge going on.
You ended with him learning that a man will always lead with love. Why was this the final lesson? And why was this lesson taught by his father?
Well, because many of the images that we see on TV, the qualities that we hear about in music and entertainment from men are not ones that are rooted in love. And I think we feel that love sometimes is something that's not an attribute of manhood, but it takes courage to love, it takes strength to love. And if everything you do is rooted in that, not only will you be content and happy as a person, you will infect others with that same love and make the world a better place. And so, like, regardless of, a man learning to love or wanting to explore or being a good friend, if all of those things are grounded in love, you will be successful as a person, as a human being in your life and help others as they walk through life.
We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back with our author, Delshawn Taylor.
Like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss a show by clicking the subscribe button now. Authored by Us is made possible by listeners like you. We thank you for your support. Now back to the show.
Welcome back, listeners. Now, before the break, Delshawn, you shared with us some of the different characters that are in the story. But there's one character that stood out for me because this was the only character that was a person who was not of color in the story. And this was the teacher. This was a character that you designed to be Caucasian for a specific reason. And part of that came from your experiences as being a teacher in the classroom. Tell us about that.
I had people ask me why I didn't choose a black teacher, and because everyone else is black in the book that he encounters, and majority of the teachers, the educators that black children see every day are white, and it can be kind of a difficult situation at times of the meeting of two cultures that have different stereotypes that they are bringing to these daily encounters. But I wanted to paint a picture of where the teacher is not the enemy, they are not the prosecutor or the judge, they are your friend, and they are there to help you be successful. And so, not giving a little too much away, but she encourages him that a man loves to learn and enlighten his mind. And I think that's so important that in these educational settings, that not just for students to do that, but for teachers to see how important their words are and how much power they carry in the development of our children.
That's absolutely correct. That you introduce characters that don't always look the same, but they can carry forth the same mission that
Mhm.
you have in your book, which is to guide this young man on his path. We don't have to look like each other. We don't have to have the same experience. But
Mhm.
again, as long as I see you, I can add value to your experience.
Being an educator, I found that many of the white educators, largely female, felt as if they did not have the tools or the understanding to be able to connect and impart wisdom into our kids. And I think that is understandable to a certain extent. And so they typically rely on black male teachers who may be in the building, few and far between. But I wanted to stress that in them is all they need if they are truly committed to teaching all students and meeting the students where they are and not bringing any type of preconceived notions or stereotypes when they see them. Just seeing them as a young person who they can help grow and be successful. If they focus on that and teach them, that's all they have to do. And I found that with kids, not just black kids or Hispanic kids or kids in general, they just want to feel that their voice is heard, and that's what I tried to do through this book. This young boy is posing questions, and everyone is taking the time to respond with a thoughtful response.
Now, Delshawn, how did you bring this book to life? Are you self-published, or how what was your path to getting this book produced and into the hands of young readers?
Yeah, so I am self-published. I did a lot of research trying to decide what was the best route, and also having a background as a professional musician and composer, the kind of the same question that arises like whether you want to self-publish your music or go through a publisher. And I kind of came to the same conclusion that I would like to self-publish as it would give me a lot more control over the book. It might be slightly difficult, but again, I wanted to do this on my own terms, in my own way, and just have autonomy in all of my decision making concerning the book. So I think that's why self-publishing was felt the most. It was the option in which I felt most at home. Also, Amazon is kind of a leader in the business world with regards to they have Amazon Prime, and anyone who wants a book can get it in 2 days. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go with Amazon. It's friendly, it's easy. But of course, that is the publishing side of it. But I wanted to find an illustrator who I thought embodied what the book would look like. And a lot of times when you're working with larger publishing companies, they typically have illustrators that they work with, and I took the time. I joined the Society of Children's Books Writers and Illustrators and looked through some illustrators there. And I ended up I searched through several pages on Facebook of illustrators, and I found Noor, who was the author of this book. And she had recently done an illustration for a book with a young black girl. And I saw that and I was like, oh, wow, I bet she could. I know she can capture what I'm looking for in this book. And I also wanted to choose a female writer, I mean, a female illustrator, because, I think it's important I think as a black male, it's very, very important for me to uplift women of specifically minority women. And if I have a chance to collaborate, I want to collaborate with them or other minorities. So it was important for me that I choose an illustrator who was a woman and of color.
What has been the most challenging part of your author journey? Was it the writing, the publishing, or is it just sharing the story? What has presented the most challenge to you?
Writing the story came very naturally. I think being a composer kind of lended itself, and being a writer, I love writing in general. It kind of made that part of the process easy. I think there were two parts that have been, I guess, more difficult. One, as you kind of alluded to, finding an illustrator, because it really has to be uh, a great marriage in that sense of the illustration and the words in order for it to translate well to the reader. So that would be the first. And the second has been due to the pandemic, getting the book out there. I mean, the book has done pretty well. I mean, I think for my first book, I've been really surprised with how people have picked it up. And I mean, people in France have the book. I'm actually sending a signed copy to a mother there. I mean, it's amazing how God works, and so I feel very fortunate in that. But I think with the pandemic, I couldn't do like a book tour, or I couldn't like have a book signing. Being self-published, you don't have the luxury of having a publisher that's established and has all of these outlets to which they can advertise and get your book in front of different spaces and different people. So it's like having a second job, and you have to have a marketing plan. Um,
Yeah.
so I'm thankful that I'm in my education. I've taken marketing classes, so that's been helpful. But I think that's been the other challenging part of this process.
So, Delshawn, being an author was not your original path. You're not only a musician, you're also a composer. Tell us about that part of your background.
Sure. So, my, I guess, educational career journey is kind of a melting pot of different sectors. But when I first went off to school, I was a music major and later changed to being pre-med psychology. Yeah, so I actually at one point wanted to go to medical school, was also interested in speech pathology. Like again, like I love science, I love medicine. Again, it's the whole thing of being able to use your gifts to help people. So I've worked as a behavior therapist, I worked in the ER, with physicians as a scribe. I've also worked for a healthcare consulting company. While doing all of that, I've always been writing music and working with kids in educational settings, boys and girls clubs and public schools, and creating programs. But I've also had a really, nice career. I've performed in Wales, representing the US at the International Eisteddfod in Wales, which is a really great thing that most people don't know about. Is kind of after the World War II, many countries in Europe created this festival, where they could bring all the countries together through music and song and dance. So I actually represented the U.S. there in 2016. I performed at Lincoln Center in a recital, in Chicago, at Chicago Symphony Center, with the National Recording Orchestra. Like I've really had a lot of success in that world, and I'm having a lot of success now as a composer, writing for opera and musical theater. So my life has been, as the book says, a man loves to explore and enlighten his mind. I've had a lot of interest, and I've tried. I've been thankful that my family has been supportive and all of my adventures to seek out to explore all of my passions. I recently have gotten involved in arts, as an advocate for arts equity. So I serve on a couple different boards and diversity committees, trying to make sure that people who look like me have access to classical music and musical theater, and that these organizations, symphonies, opera companies are going into these communities that are underserved. And it's not just Black, Hispanic, but from a social economic standpoint, and making sure that regardless of where you live, how much money you have access to be on the stage conducting, to be writing music for orchestras and opera companies, to write your own book. I think regardless of what it is, we need to make sure that our kids have access and opportunities to explore their passions and be whatever they want to be.
Now, when I told you that I too was a musician, I should not, it does not compare. My only performances were like my high school concerts. So there is such a tremendous impact that music has on the education of a child. I remember singing church songs and then realizing as I got older that hymns were great for helping you to identify syllables. How do you see music as being instrumental in the teaching of reading and also engaging readers?
So I think I'll answer it two ways. One, I'll start with a personal story, but I have a stutter, and most people would never know, except people who live with me, or if I get flustered. Or growing up, I wouldn't say that public speaking was something that I enjoyed, which didn't. I like to talk. Let's put it that way. But in an educational setting, when you have a stutter, you are less likely to engage, to talk, to ask questions when you don't understand something. And so when you sing, I don't know all the scientific background about it, but when you sing, there is no stutter. And so for me, music was a way for me to, in a therapeutic way, overcome that. And so I think that's to answer your question. For many kids who might have speech issues or other, I won't say disabilities or limitations that they have not been able to overcome yet. The arts can be a way for them to leave that behind. I actually wrote a curriculum that was piloted in my school corporation. I went to New York and met with my friend Ernie Panicoli, who people might know of. He is a Hip Hall of Fame inductee. He is has been around everyone in hip hop, and he's been known as the photographer for hip hop. Like he is the it guy. So go home and Google Ernie Panicoli, really great guy. So I flew to New York. We talked about this curriculum I had of using the history of hip hop in a music education setting in tandem with the traditional classical music history of Mozart, Beethoven, Bach, and what it would look like for kids to learn the history of hip hop in these classes. The curriculum I wrote, the kids learn about the history of the standard classical composers, but also Grandmaster Flash, all of these really great African Bambaataa, like all these great hip hop legends, Cool Herc. So because like you hear Nicki Minaj and all these other artists, but understanding how this came to be,
That's
your
right.
history,
That's
and
right.
it is music history, even though some people don't believe that is music history.
It,
Um,
it is.
and
Because a
so
lot of what's happening today is based on samples of what
exactly.
happened in the past.
And so it was really fun to create this curriculum. So that was one part of it, learning the history, and seeing themselves in music history. And then two, taking their stories, what they're dealing with in their life, and setting that to music, using classical music and hip hop. So the kids wrote these songs about their lives with a local composer, and we used a theme from Verdi's Requiem and a hip hop beat, and they wrote a song about their life. So it was not only a learning experience for the teacher, who was actually white, to learn about the kids and learn about hip hop, but it allowed the administrators, the other teachers in the school, to understand what these students were going through and to be able to meet them and reach them where they were. But it also gave the kids a voice as if they were a part of that process. So I know we kind of got on a tangent here, but it kind of goes back to what I was saying with the book. When there's representation and the kids can see themselves, it's more meaningful, it's relevant. When you're teaching them with music, with dances, with vehicles of expression in which it makes education fun and innovative. And when you give them a voice and validate that voice, as we saw in my book as well, education can really change, not just for the student, but for the teacher. And I think unless we do that, there's gonna be a whole generation, and I'm saying we have to write rap songs about everything, but unless we can validate the voice of the students, affirm their questions, meet them with, vehicles of expression which they can relate to and what they love, and present curriculum in which they can see themselves, we're gonna lose a whole generation of students.
So, with that, do you see yourself taking Do You Know What Makes a Man to the point where you add it to some music? Do you have Do you have
You
a
know, I
composition to go with the
when
book?
I first started writing this book, I had I wrote it in kind of a poetic prose, so I thought which lends itself to being set to music, and I thought about writing like a hip hop song or something for kids to be able to sing in class, but I thought about that. I haven't followed through on that. I'm sure I probably have a recording somewhere of myself thinking through that. But I haven't followed through with that.
We'll be back with more from Delshawn Taylor.
Hey, are you tired of walking down the greeting card aisle and not feeling represented? Well, Culture Greetings is the answer to that level of inclusivity. Visit culturegreetings.com, pick a greeting card with beautiful imagery of the culture and wonderful words that we use to connect and convey messages of love and thoughtfulness. Write your note on the inside of the card right there on the website, and we will mail it directly to your recipient from you, saving you a trip to the store. It's simple. Culture Greetings was created with you in mind. Visit culturegreetings.com.
You're listening to Authored by Us. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review so you never miss an episode. Now back to the show with your host, Zenzi Hodge.
was the book that had the most impact on you as a child?
I love Dr. Seuss books. Um, love Dr. Seuss. Um, so I will say there are two books actually on my bookshelf. One is All the Things You Can Think, and then All the Places You Will Go. Those two books, because I'm someone that's always, my wife will say, always thinking about something, always working at 10,000 projects, and always trying to go somewhere and do something. And before COVID, traveling, love to travel different places and meet different people and collaborate. And so those two books, and then the other one was, oh, What Do You Do with an Idea? Just such a great book because as an educator, as an artist, when working with kids, I've always said that in each kid, and when I write, when I sign books and send them to kids, I always say that, in you resides a wealth of ideas that will one day change the world. And I always say, as you develop these ideas, as you grow and share them with other people, make sure you lead with love, which is the end of my book. Those three books reaffirmed what I already knew and learned from those who raised me and imparted into my life that, you know, I have ideas, and those ideas have the potential to impact a lot of people, or not just a lot of people, but to impact people in general. And so that's what I love about those three books, and I hope that's what I hope that the ideas or the knowledge that is shared from my book helps many children, adults, as those three books help me.
Talking with you has really just it touched on so many things. I really, really enjoyed it.
Oh, I
So,
enjoyed it too. Yeah, I enjoyed it as well. Thank you so much for having me.
before we close, can you let us know where we can find copies of your book?
Certainly, certainly. My book is available on Amazon. So just type in "Do you know what makes a man?" and you will see it. And it's available on Kindle as well as in a paperback version.
Where can our listeners also find you?
They can find me on Facebook, just Delshawn Taylor. I'm also on Instagram at Delshawn Taylor, LinkedIn, also Twitter as well. I think it's like Shawnee, SHAWNY 19705.
And if you think you missed any portion of that, we will include our contacts for Delshawn in our podcast notes. Delshawn, thank you so much for joining us today on our episode of Authored by Us. I really enjoyed hearing from you about your book, Do You Know What Makes a Man? For parents out there, whether you have a young son or a young daughter, this isn't just a book about what makes a man, but as Delshawn has said to us, it's about what makes a good human being. So thank you for crafting this wonderful story and bringing it forward to share with children.
Most certainly. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure to talk with you and to help others learn more about this book that I hope will be a great starting point for many of their children.
Well, listeners, it's time for us to close the cover on another bookshelf gem. I'd like to thank our author, Delshawn Taylor, for being here with us today to share with us his book, Do You Know What Makes a Man? Remember, you can find Do You Know What Makes a Man on Amazon.com. We'd also like to thank this episode's sponsor, Culture Greetings. When you're looking for the perfect way to say thank you, happy birthday, or to just send well wishes, add a bit of culture to your greeting. Visit Culture Greetings at their website, culturegreetings.com. And finally, this episode would not be possible without you, our audience. We thank you for joining us each week on our Authored by Us podcast. Until next time, happy reading.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Authored by Us. Every author has a story to tell, and we enjoy bringing their stories to you each week. Whether you are listening as a young reader or are sharing this podcast with the young readers in your life, we are delighted to celebrate these stories inspired by diversity and shared in the voice of their authors. Follow us on social media at Authored by Us and subscribe to our podcast using your favorite podcast app. That way you never miss an episode. Have a gem on your bookshelf that we should have on ours? Visit us online at authoredbyus.com and let us know. Until next time, happy reading.